Hello and welcome to the Arise interview. 60 glorious minutes of multifaceted discussion where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolo. Coming up in the next hour, after years of violent unrest, history was made in the Niger Delta in 2009 when an amnesty was granted to the militants there and a peace deal was agreed. Many across the country cheered as the details unfolded. All 30,000 battle-hardened militants left their camps and handed in their weapons, trusting the government to help them start new lives. Well, 10 years later, there's a storm of anger from many in the Niger Delta, allegations of promises broken, and threats from the ex-militants to return to the creeks. So, what's gone wrong? Why are many claiming that the presidential amnesty has not worked and that Nigeria has not succeeded in reintegrating the Niger Delta militants? We'll hear from representatives of the ex-militants, the communities in the Niger Delta, and the presidential amnesty program in a moment. Now, in 2009, the then president of Nigeria, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, supported by his deputy, Goodluck Jonathan, reached out across a table and shook hands with some of the most deadly militants who for years had pommeled Nigeria's oil-rich and politically troubled Niger Delta region. The handshake sealed the deal, granting amnesty to some 30,000 rebels that had terrorized the region with violence and kidnappings, disrupting oil supplies and costing Nigeria hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. After the guns fell silent, Mr. Yar'Adua said he wanted new rules of engagement for the Delta. It was an expensive commitment, with stipends, contract awards, and thousands being given training for jobs as diverse as pipe welding and learning to become a pilot. But now, many in the Niger Delta fear that the amnesty program is under severe threat. They say the government's heart is no longer in it, and the ex-militants are caught in an uncertain future. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to some of their representatives. But first, here's a spokesman from the Ijaw Youth Council, a civil rights organization that supports the interests of the Ijaw ethnic group in the Niger Delta, talking about how the amnesty program has failed the region.
Demobilization, disarmament, reintegration is in stage one.
Okay.
These three ABC is in stage one. Is in stage one. That is, bring out the boys. And the boys came out willingly. The boys came out willingly. Demobilization, disarmament, reintegration is in stage one. That has been done. The moment you bring the boys out from the creeks, you bring them out from the forest, and you take the guns from them, that ABC leg is being taken care of. Now, we have been on the second stage, which is rehabilitation, for over 10 years. And we are dilly-dallying, we are playing politics, we are doing everything. If you are an experienced person and you try to advise them, they will tell you that, oh, you belong to one political party or the other. The Amnesty Office was not formed on a political basis. The Amnesty Office was formed as a result of genuine agitation of the people of the Niger Delta, of the Ijaw people. But today, we play politics. So we are doubling around the second stage now for the past 10 years. We are doubling around, rehabilitate these people. Rehabilitation includes sending them to school, giving them, it goes beyond giving somebody starter packs. It goes beyond giving somebody one umbrella and 3 shares to share research card. That's what we are talking about. Now, let me tell you that it is dangerous for you to train somebody how to fly a plane and you don't give him a plane to fly. Any plane that that guy gets on his way, he will fly that plane and crash it somewhere because he does not have a fissure. And that is what the Nigerian government has done to the Niger Delta people. That's what the Nigerian government has done to the Ijaw people, and it's very, very dangerous. Yeah. So we are at the second stage. The third stage is, we are talking about strategic implementation plan. Nobody has done anything about that. That system at that stage has been abandoned.
Well, that's a spokesman from one of the groups in the Niger Delta. For more on the rising tide of anger in that region, I'm joined now in the studio by the immediate past president of the Ijaw National Congress, Charles Harry, and the National Treasurer of the Ijo Youth Council, Wabiye Idoniboye. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And we're hoping to get a third guest who was himself a militant and who's a beneficiary of the government's presidential amnesty program. I understand he's on his way as we speak. But thank you for joining us. And I'll start with you, Mr. Harry. Just explain for us the current state of the Niger Delta amnesty program as you understand it, which was launched by late President Yar'Adua with so much hope in 2009.
Well, this is a very simple problem. I think very many people don't really understand what this is all about. I was very, very lucky or fortunate because the very first amnesty program in this country was put together by the Rotimi Amechi administration, and I was a member of that. And actually,
Rotimi Amechi used to be the governor of Rivers
State
at
the time.
Right.
And
what year was that?
This is 2007, 2008. Right. Then General, the very first coordinator who started the amnesty program for the Yar'Adua administration, had to come to our camp in Eche to understudy what was being done so that they have a template on which to work. Now, that template that was given to them, they ran foul of it in one aspect. They resorted to paying stipends to these people. And that was a misnomer in the first place. It is building or feeding the entitlement mentality that was already a problem in the Niger Delta. Now, having done that wrong, up till today, there are people being paid stipends, 65,000 naira or thereabouts, for carrying arms and doing carrying out antisocial activities, some that border on gross criminality against the state. Now, a lot of these people now feel this "you owe me" attitude. When you say a lot of people in the Niger Delta are complaining about the amnesty program, it's because of the entitlement mentality.
No, I understand that, and I think that's a very good point you're making. But of course, the big problem here is the consequences of ignoring those people.
I will come to that.
Right.
Now, the program is a DDR program. The United States UN Secretary General at the Sudan Donors Conference did say that when you disarm these people, you rehabilitate them. The most important aspect is reintegration and reinsertion with respect and obviously giving them self-acknowledgement and self-belief. What people do not understand, Professor Charles Dokubo is trying to do, is because they see.
And Professor Charles Dokubo is the head of the Presidential Amnesty Program.
And the coordinator of the amnesty program, yes. Right. And what he's doing, he had looked at this thing from more of an academic point of view and is building a template of which, how do I meet the challenges and the needs of our people at a time like this? When the young man spoke, the INC spokesperson or president or whatever he calls himself now, he was speaking from a misconception. He is speaking from a lack of knowledge of the processes.
Right, okay. I'm gonna, well then...
Just to end that.
Yeah, it's just because you have taken a bit of time and we've got to bring
just
the
to end that
in here. Right.
The main issue today why people are unhappy is because it doesn't seem to be a gravy train anymore.
Right. That's an interesting point. And the other interesting point you made was that the person who spoke there, who's the president of the Ijaw Youth Council, does not understand the process. Isn't that a failure of governments? And I'll put that to you, because if the beneficiaries of your amnesty program don't understand the processes, then clearly you're doing something fatally wrong.
No, to be fair to the federal government, Owalemi, who is the IYC, let me say factional IYC president.
Factional president.
He's not a beneficiary, so you don't expect him to actually understand what the program is about. One thing I will say is that, to be fair to the government, the federal government, the problem we have in the Niger Delta is lack of unity, lack of love for one another. I am, like you introduced me, I'm the national treasurer of the IYC. Why am I the national treasurer of the IYC and he is the national president of the IYC? Because there were two different elections. One held first, which I was the national treasurer. Another one held later because some vested interests were not happy with the first election, and he became the president. That is what happens.
So you're in the same organization?
Yeah, we're in the same organization, but we're in different
factions. Because your thing said Congress, his said council, but it's the same.
No, it's the same thing. It's
it's
council. Yeah,
right.
Youth Council worldwide. Yeah.
Okay.
And even my respected elder here, he was in INC. If you check now and find out what's happening with the INC, you find out that there are 2 or 3 factions of the INC. So it's something that we in the Niger Delta have been suffering. We are not united. We don't love ourselves. Look at what the federal government has done for us. Niger Delta Ministry, NDDC, Amnesty Program. All these are just for us, just the 9 states. They pay these boys, the beneficiaries, 65,000 every month. That money is not going down the drain. It's
but there've been a lot of protests. I mean, we've seen people protesting in the Port Harcourt area. We've heard a lot of people saying that there is something dysfunctional about the amnesty program.
Why are they protesting? Ask them the simple questions. Why are they protesting? One problem we have, especially in Nigeria, is that we focus on the negatives too much. A lot of positive things are happening. Nobody's interested in the positive things that are happening. When they are protesting, they should come out and ask the amnesty program, how many people have you empowered? How many people have you sent
Well,
to school?
that young man was making an argument, which I have to agree with you, Mr. Harry, that there certainly is. Certainly that's the perception of a lot of Nigerians from other parts of the country who are not getting any entitlements. Yeah. There is a sense of entitlement, because what he was saying was that people have been trained as, in different fields, and now that they've been trained, that they should be given jobs, having been trained. In other words, that because there are the rest of Nigerians, they come out of education, they go and find jobs for themselves.
Yeah. But why?
But they want to be spoon-fed. Is that the point?
Yeah, talking about being spoon-fed, I would say a couple of us are sorry to say this, a lot of people might frown against it. So a lot of us in the Niger Delta region are lazy, because of most of these things the federal government, handouts the federal government is giving to us. A young Niger Delta boy will be relaxed at home and be expecting 65,000, expecting the amnesty program to empower him and give him a job. The training alone, which the president or the factional president was talking about, is a positive. Has he said thank you for the training? You've been trained. The training alone is an empowerment for you. With that training, you can actually go and look for a job. If the amnesty program is supposed to give you a job, then be patient. You don't really need to protest for every single thing.
Right, okay.
The protest should be thank you protests.
Okay, well, stay with us. We'll talk about this some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our discussion about alleged moves to halt the presidential amnesty program in the Niger Delta. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, according to some leading groups in the restive Niger Delta region of Nigeria, the future that was mapped out for the 30,000 ex-militants when they signed up to the presidential amnesty program in 2009 has become uncertain following what they say are clandestine moves by some in President Buhari's administration to scupper the project. They say that having kept their part of the bargain, which was coming out of the creeks and having the weapons removed from their hands, disarmament in 60 days as it was called, the next stage was for them to be reintegrated into Nigerian society, a society from which they'd been estranged for years. But the process has not been easy, and today, 10 years later, there are voluble complaints that the ex-militants are still stuck in the rehabilitation stage, neither being fully integrated nor going back to the creeks. And of course, the third stage of the agreement, massive development of the region, is nowhere in sight. Well, in a moment, we'll speak some more to representatives of some communities in the Niger Delta. But first, here's a spokesman for the Nigerian government defending the administration's fidelity to the Amnesty program.
There is also an availability. I've just been told that there's a bank that can give them money to even develop further. So what the office can do is to stand as a guarantee so that these people that at once they are trained and they set up their business centers or whatever they are doing, we can always continue to assist them. Like I always said, it's not only training and abandoning, it's training and putting them in job, work placement. That's what I'm doing now. And for me to have heard from somebody there that there's a provision where even those that have been trained can be given soft loan. This soft loan can be guaranteed by the organization, my organization, so that we just want them to continue with their life, pay taxes to society, and also help others, employ others. The more you employ, the more you become productive. And as you are productive, you pay more tax to government.
Today, we are beneficiaries of the Presidential Amnesty Program study in 16 countries around the world and 15 local universities, both federal and private. From inception to date, the program has graduated over 8,852 delegates from offshore facilities and 2,849 delegates from universities within the country. This year alone, 2016, over 140 delegates graduated from various institutions in the United Kingdom. The program still has about 900 students in training in various institutions abroad, as well as 2,259 students in Nigerian universities.
And that's the government side putting forward its achievements under that presidential amnesty program that operates in the Niger Delta. With me in the studio, the immediate past president of the Ijaw National Congress, Charles Harry, the national treasurer of the Ijaw Youth Council, Wabiye Idoniboye. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And you were completing a thought before we went on break.
Yeah, if you can just take me back a bit. I think I was talking about the unity in the
You were
region.
talking about the fact that, you know, people don't like themselves very much.
Yeah, they don't like themselves very much, yes, and I can remember.
According to you,
yeah,
not me.
Okay, yeah, according to me. And I was also saying we tend to forget the positive side of life and always forget on the negative side. Like I was saying, if you listen to what the representatives were saying, they're quoting figures. So number of people have been this.
Yeah, but the problem with government, and we know this for a fact, I mean, it's not just in the Niger Delta. The governments love to quote figures and say, we've done this, we've done this, we've done that. But in many, many cases, you will find that either the things that they've done have not been done to the satisfaction of the people they were supposed to be doing it for, or they're simply making claims sometimes that are difficult to verify. And I'm not saying that the government doesn't do things, because the idea of the amnesty was something that was welcomed by all Nigerians. But the question is, how far has it gone towards, you know, alleviating the difficulties that everybody recognizes people in the Niger Delta are faced with?
No, we're talking about the Niger Delta. We're not talking about 30,000 youths. Like I said in my opening statement, we have the NDDC, we have the Niger Delta Ministry. They are doing a lot. If you check how much, ask and find out how much goes to the Amnesty Office.
Yeah, but what are they doing? I mean, if you go to, I'm curious to know. You know, because people need to know these things. I mean, if you go to the Niger Delta, the place is ravaged by poverty. I mean, I've traveled through the entire region. I've produced documentaries in the Niger Delta.
Yes.
The level of pollution is astonishing.
Yes.
The roads are bad. There's, I mean, there's, you know, it's like, and you're thinking, well, what's going on?
No, but to correct you, you should say some roads are bad. Not all the roads are bad in the Niger Delta.
Well, obviously, but I mean, the point is that the percentage of roads that are bad are enough to raise considerable questions.
But you don't have the facts, you don't have the percentage.
Well, I've travelled through there. I have an epistemological privilege of knowing what the place is like.
It's possible that you're going through the bad roads. I'm not saying that all roads are good. I'm not saying that all roads are bad. What I'm just trying to say is that we should actually be fair to government. if you have an issue, ask questions. Go and do your research and find out how many roads have been done in the Niger Delta over this period of time. How much has been given to the Niger Delta over this period of time? Like I was saying earlier, it's not just, but because we're talking about the Amnesty program, it's not just the 30,000 ex-agitators that will solve the problem of the Niger Delta. Some money goes to NDDC, some money goes to Niger Delta Ministry. They have projects scattered around the place. If you check, you will see. But now the major problem we're having is publicity, is media. A well-respected politician in one of his interviews in recent days said something. He said, this current administration is investing a lot in development, investing a lot in projects, and forgetting that you need to inform people of these projects that you're doing. The fact that you're investing, carrying all the money and focusing on the projects, you're forgetting that you're building up hate on the other side because the people really don't know what they're doing. So
right, okay. Let me bring in Mr. Harry here, because, I mean, as we were saying when we went on break, that there are three aspects to this amnesty program. There is the, the coming out of the creeks and giving up your arms. There is the sort of rehabilitation, and then there's development.
There's development.
Right. Where do things stand as far as you know?
There is a lacuna in what is going on. It's very clear. I may not totally agree with my brother sitting here. They say what the old sees sitting down, the young can see standing up. We still drink water from where we defecate. There is a big schism between what is said and the actuality. But this is not the job of the amnesty. The amnesty's job
is focused on amnesty.
On the 30,000 people, which is a spittle in the sea.
Yeah, but isn't that
of
part
humanity
of
in the Niger
No, I understand
Delta?
that, but isn't part of the agreement, part of what constitutes the amnesty package, a third sort of arm is development of the Niger Delta?
That is the crux of the matter.
Right.
That is where there is a lacuna, and you cannot blame that lacuna on the amnesty leadership.
Right.
For failing, because they have just told you, for those who understand the processes, what is being done by Professor Charles Takuba, for instance, right now, it's the epitome of what he should be doing.
Right.
But what is missing is what the NDDC,
that's the Niger Delta Development,
and the and the ministry should be doing. They are the developmental arms.
Right. So they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
If you remember, they may not be being funded as they ought to. You can see that in the last how many years the East-West Road has remained as it was in 2015.
Can I raise a point
Jonathan
here?
left.
Because speaking on behalf of people who don't understand some of these things and people who are looking from the outside in, the Niger Delta, a lot of the states, and Rivers State in particular, gets some of the biggest allocations of any states in this country.
I'll speak to that too.
I mean, it's like people wonder, I mean, what on earth what are they doing with the money?
Then look at the terrain you're talking about. It takes almost 10 times more, the same amount to build a road in Sokoto as to build a road in Amasoma, or build a road from Kula to Ekulama, because these places have swamp terrain.
Right.
Even when you want to build a house in the Niger Delta, you have to put raft foundations.
But is there an element of corruption there as well?
Of course there is corruption all over the country.
Yeah, but I'm talking about specifically in the Niger Delta. Because the reason why that raises specific questions is that the people from the Niger Delta have presented themselves as the ones who've been sort of hard done by, and a lot of people agree with that.
That's a fact.
That the oil wealth comes from their territory. It's been polluted. Everybody agrees with that. And that there should be redress. And that's what all this is about, from the amnesty program to...
You talked about having traversed the Niger Delta. The level of pollution is mind-boggling.
I agree.
We are talking about
I absolutely
Ogoni land.
agree. I absolutely, and I've been to Ogoni land. I absolutely agree.
Just a needle in the haystack.
I agree. I've been there.
If you go by air from Port Harcourt on a helicopter to Bonny Island and you see the level of devastation, these are people who are disinherited and something ought to be done.
You're absolutely right.
I agree with you that there is a gap. I agree with you that the governors could have done a little bit much more rather than focus on grandeur programs and projects. A little bit more could have been done as to the nitty-gritty of the lives of the people.
Okay, let me just bring Mr. Idoniboye in. I mean, based on what Mr. Harry is saying, could there be justification in the sort of thing we saw that young man saying there, based on what he's saying, that, you know, beyond what is happening specifically with the militants, there is still the sense that tremendous underdevelopment is taking place in the Niger Delta? We've just got about 20 seconds, but we'll continue when we come back.
That's very true. If it's solid, I'm 100% in agreement with him. There's so much underdevelopment. There's pollution, there's agony, there's misery, it's terrible.
Okay, well, just hold that thought. We'll come back to you when we come back. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including we continue as we look at the other side of the presidential amnesty story. We'll be hearing from those who think, and you've heard from some of them, that the project is working well. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyagolu. It was supposed to herald a new era of peace, reconciliation and rehabilitation, the presidential amnesty program introduced into the restive Niger Delta region in 2009 by President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. Next to progress in banking reforms, offering amnesty to the rebels and tackling unrest in the oil-rich Niger Delta was seen as Mr. Yar'Adua's greatest success. Attacks and kidnappings by militants in the region, which cut Nigeria's oil profits by 25%, virtually disappeared. But now there are renewed threats that the wound, which was in the process of healing, is gashed open again, and warnings that there could once again be violent confrontation between armed groups, the international oil industry, and the government. Take a listen to this spokesman from one of the prominent Niger Delta communities.
Yeah, when you bring them, drop their arms. That is the first stage, which is A, B, and C. Then the second stage is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation means let them go to school, teach them how to trade. The ones that have gone to school, there was a plan to employ them by government or by IOCs, and that has failed. That has failed. There is nobody that has gone for one training or the other that is successfully employed today. And that's why I said that it's dangerous for you to train somebody out to fly a plane and you don't give him a plane to fly officially.
What do you think will happen for those who have acquired this knowledge and they are not fully empowered or gained?
For those that have acquired all kinds of skills or one form of skill or the other that are not gainfully employed, it's like the country is sitting on a keg of gunpowder.
Country is sitting on a powder keg. That's a bit worrying. Well, we're expecting a representative from the presidential amnesty program, but alas, they haven't turned up. But with me in the studio is a journalist who has covered the twists and turns of the Niger Delta crisis, Chuka Akunna, Chuks, he likes to be called, Akunna, editorial director of Authority newspaper, which is a multicultural community publication. And still with me in the studio, Charles Harry, who is the past president of the Ijaw National Congress and the national treasurer of the Ijaw Youth Council, Wabiye Idoniboye. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, and thank you, Chuks, for coming in. Good to see you again.
My pleasure.
Been a few years, but there you are, still as bald as an egg.
Exactly.
But
Thank you, Charles.
But I mean, you followed, as I said, the twists and turns of the Niger Delta as a journalist, which means that you cover the region objectively. What differences, if any, would you say that this amnesty program has made to the region?
Yes, don't forget that in 2007, President Yar'Adua, a Muslim Fulani from Katsina State took over the reins of power. And shortly before he took over power, militants had been in the creeks from about early 2000, because I remember as a reporter with this day, the first story actually fired from Port Harcourt in October was a commander of NNS Okemini. When his inaugural parade, he told the youth at the time, he told his officers at the time to unleash their superior firepower on militants. Then that was, militants had not gotten to that advanced stage at the time, but gradually during the Obasanjo years, we have found the rising tide of militancy up till 2007 when Yar'Adua took over. And to the late president's credit, in less than 3 months, he was able to put up a very articulate amnesty program. Because at the time, I remember, even the government house in Port Harcourt, what greeted you when you arrived at the government house were armored tanks. It was, the raids were
the siege
ceaseless.
mentality.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Nightlife was completely dead in Port Harcourt mostly. All the oil companies relocated. And then, thanks to the amnesty program, because, Yar'Adua did a lot. And don't forget that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, who was vice president at the time, he braved the odds, actually walked into, literally to the lion's den. He went to meet the militants.
He did a lot of the negotiating.
He did,
right.
and it paid off. And it's about 10 years down the line, from less than 700,000 barrels of oil, we've seen our oil output soar. But then, everything comes with a price. We have 7 oil-producing states. Then we have the NDDC. Then we have this amnesty program, which was very laudable. But then, don't forget that there are constituent states that make up the oil-producing region. And we're not unaware of, if you read media reports, you see agitations against the person of Professor Charles Tokubo, who is the current, is the incumbent advisor and coordinator of the amnesty program. And this is not surprising, because given the wealth, the money at the disposal of the program, and then the bid by certain political forces to control these resources. That is the crux of the matter. We are aware that we have 2 Niger Deltans who are ministers. We have Senator Godswill Akpabio, who is a Niger Delta minister. They also have Tim Silva, a former governor of Bayelsa State. And don't forget that the incumbent advisor is from Rivers State. It's from Rivers State. So these are, we have internal politics, and like the last speaker said, there's a need for the Niger Delta region. You cannot say Nigerians don't love you, and then when you are asked to share a piece of cake, then you also squabble over. So that's the problem.
So based on what you've said, do you see a legitimate argument from those people, the kind of person we just saw, the chap who's the president of that youth council, who are saying that basically it doesn't matter who's at fault, they're disgruntled with the program because it's not working properly?
I don't think so. You see, we were all in this world when the Russians said that it's best to practice communism, that we'll share all the resources among everybody and people will be happy. But it didn't work out. You see, no matter how much you give ex-militants, no matter how much you give the ex-militants, it wouldn't be enough for them. You see, you ask yourself, how many Nigerians go home with 65,000 naira a month? These are questions. You cannot just keep giving people money and money and money.
They've also been making arguments about that, because one of the ex-militants was saying that they're not actually getting 65,000 naira, that many of them are getting 40,000 naira, and that someone else is creaming off the top of. I don't have any.
But we should also forget that before the amnesty program came in force, most of those militants were also tired, because there was this onslaught by the federal government, the army, the navy against them. So it was a win-win for both sides. So there's nowhere in the world where you keep paying a militant or an ex-agitator money forever. Yeah,
but let me just bring Mr. Harry in, because some of those militants have suggested that they had that their lives, they were making easier money when they were in the creeks, that all they had to do was phone up an oil company, threaten to blow up a pipeline, and money would come rushing to them, and that now they're sort of subjected to receiving, as it were, salaries, and that for them is that increases the temptation that they may want to sort of resume hostilities again.
That's to a very large extent a fallacy. That's not true. It has no basis, in fact. I was in the creeks myself. I was sent there by the elders of the Ijaw Nation in those days. We created PANDAC. There is something called PANDEF today, of which I'm the national treasurer. But then we created PANDAC to speak.
Yeah, but what are those things? I mean,
People.
You're giving us
PANDAC.
abbreviations.
Okay, PANDAC is Pan-Niger Delta Action Council.
Right.
It was supposed to be the speaking voice for the Niger Delta, and it was through its men came about. That is the military arm, so to speak. Now, when Obasanjo came in, he tried to see how he could discuss with these people. Actually, militancy was escalated in Nigeria by the Obasanjo regime when he started flying them in presidential jets to Abuja. So different other young men became generals, when in actual sense they were the big five, so they call themselves still today. And they are, in quote, maybe the problem we're having today, because the big five are the ones who have this entitlement mentality. When you talk about money not getting to the boys, that used to be in those days, because I think that practice of paying the bulk money to the leaders of the camps and they pay the boys have been stopped. They are now paid through banks. I am aware of that. So that allegation is not there. That they are making more money, that is not true. First and foremost, what they were doing principally, and if the truth must be said to power, is that 80% of them who call themselves militants were actually more into bunkering and other forms of illegal activities, which had very little to do with the agitation in the Niger Delta. The cry, and why I'm here sitting today, is that that agitation, for which some of us gave a lot of our lives for, there's still a lacuna, which is the development I spoke about. But to end it, the truth of the matter is that why are we here today? Some people are creating a situation of a siege or a presumed siege that may come if one person is not displaced from his place of work, so that business as usual can continue. But that's not what we're worried about. Those of us who are more attuned to the issues are wanting a situation where they would have put their energies into saying, where is the cleanup program for the entire Niger Delta? Where are the developmental initiatives? Right. We can't continue drinking water from the same place where we defecate. Where are the roads? Where are the hospitals?
No, but he did touch on that. He talked about the fact that the third aspect of that amnesty was never...
He's talking about jobs, creating jobs. Look, there is a serious problem of unemployment in Nigeria. Civil unemployment, not even about militants or anybody. What the Amnesty is trying to do, what Charles Dokubo is doing, is creating self-reliant, self-employed, and employers of labor.
Okay, I'm going to just ask you to hold on. I'm sorry about that, but we must take a break now. But we will come back in a minute. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our discussion about alleged moves to halt the presidential amnesty program in the Niger Delta. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniekolu. Now, so far, the rebels, the agitators and the ex-militants in the Niger Delta have played mostly by the rules, though some of them have reportedly gone off the rails, making money by extortion, oil theft and kidnappings. There's also the growing incidence of piracy in the coastal areas, which is increasingly turning Nigeria into a hotspot for robbery and violence on the high seas. All that suggests that the government is yet to adequately tackle the root cause of the unrest in the Niger Delta, which is that despite its immense oil wealth, the region remains largely underdeveloped, which is why it's important to heed the warnings being sounded about the high risk of violence in the Niger Delta, because according to analysts, if things aren't managed well, it could threaten the peace in the region once again. Well, with me in the studio is a journalist who's covered the Niger Delta crisis extensively, Chuk Sekunna, editorial director of Authority newspaper, a multi-cultural communications publication. And also with me, Mr. Harry, who is from the Niger Delta as well. He is the immediate past president of the Joint National Congress, and of course Wabiye Idoniboye, who's the national treasurer of the Joint Youth Council. Pardon me, Nigeria is a rather diverse, ethnically diverse country. So getting around some of the names are a bit of a problem. But you were finishing a thought, and I want you to complete what you were saying. This is the last segment of the discussion. But I'm just a little bit concerned that these young, a lot of the youth in the Niger Delta are getting restive again for whatever reason, that if whatever their grievances are not addressed in a way that would be seen to be sort of suitable, that you could have problems there again.
That may, to a very large extent, be true, but it's not actually as feasible or easily put together as that, because there are diverse. There is no command structure in the Niger Delta as it used to be in 2007, 2006, 2005.
So you don't see that sort of cycle of violence coming back again?
We hope not.
Right.
But it's possible that it could, if some things maybe not be done. But we could tackle it. And I always say that Nigeria focuses on the effects rather than the causative factors.
Right.
If the causative factors for these anomalies are taken care of, I don't see how we can go back to 2004.
Right. Okay, let me bring you in, Mr. Idoniboye, because the argument that some of these chaps are making, those who are discrediting the presidential amnesty program and the whole sort of attitude to the Niger Delta, which they think hasn't really changed and has apparently got worse in their estimation under President Buhari, is that they believe that President Buhari is focusing more attention on the insurgency in the northeast and trying to calm the restive elements there, and is therefore ignoring the Niger Delta, and that if that continues, it's likely to create problems and potentially people agitating again in a way that might not be conducive for Nigeria.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the government. I'm not speaking on behalf of the government, but to be fair to the government, I don't think they've stopped. There's any month that they haven't given any of the agencies, the NDDC, the Niger Delta Ministry, and the Amnesty Program, what is due them, budget-wise, as in what's in the budget for them. I don't think they've stopped it in any way. So if they haven't stopped it, I don't think it's fair for anybody to say the government is tilting towards.
But has there been any reduction in the budget that used to be allocated to the Niger Delta? For example, I was looking at the latest budget. There's about 80 billion naira or so allocated to the Niger Delta, but then there's a new allocation to the northeast, which is about 30 billion. I'm wondering whether that money is coming from what used to go to the Niger Delta.
Well, I know there's no reduction in it. I know, looking at the budget, the recent budget, I know the Amnesty Program is getting the normal 65 they got.
Right.
I don't know what the NDDC got and the Niger Delta Ministry, but I know there's no reduction. Coming to the part you were talking about, restiveness coming up, one thing we forget is that in all these states in the Niger Delta, there's something we call the Chief Security Officer. These Chief Security Officers, who are the governors, have security votes. Lots of money, billions of naira. What are they using it for? That is what they're supposed to use and stop restiveness, not the amnesty program. Like I said earlier, the amnesty program is for 30,000 youths. 30,000 youths, their names are there, they're getting their 65. None of them have complained that they're not getting their 65,000. They're all getting their 65,000. Now, the new ones that are coming up, yes, for whatever reason, we have governors that should be looking into that, not even the federal government. If the governors can't take care of their states, then they should beg the federal government and ask for a state of emergency. Let them take care of the state for them. Why would we be sitting now here talking about sea piracy and kidnapping and arresting states when we have governors that have allocation, they have IGR, they have Paris funds, they have a lot.
Let me just bring Chukwueze Kunna in. He's a journalist who's covered that region extensively. And I mean, I'm just wondering, because we hear a lot of people say that it's not just piracy in the high seas, that part of the reason why we're seeing this rise again in apparent crime, I mean the kidnappings coming back again, is because at the early stage of this amnesty program, a lot of contracts, big contracts, were given to people in the Niger Delta, some of the ex-militant leaders and all that sort of thing. They got security contracts to patrol and, oversee the sort of security of oil pipelines and all of that. I mean, what has happened to that? Is that partly a reason why people are feeling angry and saying, well, we used to get a lot more, we're now getting a lot less? There's a possibility. You see, there's this saying that if you don't want a dog to steal meat, or so when you hang this on its neck, it wouldn't steal it. See, I'm not trying to justify the rising tide, crime wave in the Niger Delta, which is not peculiar to the region. It's all over the country, north, central, that everywhere. We have this rising tide. But the issue is this, you see, it is only fair that if you want to give contracts to people from a particular area, you consider, that's what you call right of first refusal. Right. You give it to them. It's only when they consistently display an inability to deliver that you can now talk about giving it to outsiders. So there's wisdom in both the amnesty program and the federal government giving contracts to people from the area. We saw Jonathan's cousin as Ebola robot. There was this very lengthy trial over a $40 million security contract he got from the former NSA, Brahim Dasuki. So these are issues. If you don't patronize people from that area, who are you going to patronize? And it's always better as a policy to patronize them so that they can, there's what you call the ripple effect. Ripple effect. So they will also, these monies will trickle down, and these guys who claim that they are not employed or that they've trained and they're not employed, they also have a way of accommodating them. So at least they're working for their money. What is your take on that, Mr. Harry?
I want to agree very fully with him that ordinarily, when you want to create a place, you look at where the shoe pinches. And then the cyclical, I'm a banker by training. When you give 10 naira, the next person uses 5 naira, it becomes 15. The next person uses 2 naira, it becomes 17. If you localize, for instance, if you give the building of a road in the Niger Delta to a company that will import its own people there and do everything there and extract the benefits from that contract from the locality, really, then the cyclical exchange will not be there.
Right, absolutely.
So, absolutely, it is proper that majority of the contracts, I didn't say all, majority of the contracts, if you go back to the Willings Commission report, it said very clearly that the people at the center do not understand the problems there. And it is simple. If you bring a man from Sokoto to come and build a borehole, just an ordinary borehole, in Kayama, he will produce red water. It's been happening in Kula up till
well, I'm afraid that
came
story
now to get water for them.
Sadly, that story is going to have to
wait.
Hold off for another
day.
time. But I want to thank all of you very much indeed. Charles Harry, Wabiye Idoni Boye, and of course Chuk Sekunda. Thank you very much.
A pleasure to be here.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.